others will join. So Hare Krishna everyone. So welcome to our Gita Gyan level 2. So we will get started with our prayers. Om Ajnanatimirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurumilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Sri Chaitanya Manobishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Guru Vaishnavam Shri Rupam Sagrajadam Sahagana Raghunathanvitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakhanvitam He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpathe Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Bhakta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Jayatam Surato Pangur Mama Manda Matirgati Matsarvasva Padam Bojo Radha Madana Mohana Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prastaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Niti Namine Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Sanyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine Jaya Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Srivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Rama Hare Hare Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prastaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vigna Vinasha Narasimhaiti Namine Mukam Karoti Vachalam Pangum Langayitim Girim Yat Kripa Tamaham Vande Shri Guru Dinatarinam Paramananda Madhavam Sri Chaitanya Mishwaram Om Tat Sat. Hare Krishna everyone. So I just mute some people. Okay. So welcome back to our discussion on scientific spirituality. So we are continuing from the previous session 2 weeks ago. So I'll just do a quick recap on just to bring us to where what we were discussing. So excuse me. So previously we were discussing about how one could understand that there is a creator. Simply, not even, it's just logical. Simply by logic, looking around us, we can understand that definitely there is a God, a creator. Just like how we were talking about, if there is an art, so definitely there is an artist. An artist is a person. And similarly, we showed examples of how the entire creation can be work of art. The most beautiful flower, the most beautiful living creature, all of this in the wondrous of colors. So definitely it is, if even a normal simple picture of an art has a person or an artist behind it, what to speak of complex art pieces. So similarly, if there is a design, then there is a designer. Also indicates a person. And it can be further extrapolated that if there is creation, then there is also creator, a person. Because in our experience, none of these things we have experienced that there is art or design or creation without a personality behind it, right? We have never seen such a thing. Always there will be something behind, someone behind it. And the same applies to laws. So in this universe, we have physical laws, we have various different laws. So all these laws also imply a lawmaker, and that again indicates a person. And we have organization. If we have, I showed the example of Microsoft, of Google, so many wonderful multinational organizations, all of them can be traced to a person behind. So what else to speak of the organization of the universe? So definitely an organization indicates an organizer. Again, leads to a person. And ultimately, all of these things, art, design, creation, law, organization, none of these things can exist without intelligence. And when we say intelligence, the question arises, whose intelligence? So again, leads to a personality behind it. And therefore, we can also come to nature. Some people will say the answer to some of these questions, you can say nature, but nature implies whose nature? Someone's nature. We all have our nature. So why not nature, as in Mother Nature, have a personality behind it? So therefore, that is also another implication of logic. So based on logic, which is actually the fruit of scientific thought, and we have people like Newton, who says this most beautiful artistic and beautiful design, beautiful system indicating organization and law of the sun, planets, comets could only proceed from the council indicating intelligence and dominion of an intelligent and powerful being. So if we really apply scientific thought process, simply by the flow of logic, we will come to the conclusion as how Newton has concluded and has how Lord Kelvin, the father of thermodynamics, has concluded. Overwhelming, strong, not only not just strong proofs, overwhelming strong proofs of intelligent and benevolent design lie all around us. The atheistic idea is so nonsensical that I cannot put it into words. So this is what we were talking about in the previous session, how the real understanding of scientific process is basically a step-by-step approach for the purpose of finding out the truth. So there is a clear process in which we accept and reject hypothesis, and in order for us to test whether the hypothesis is correct or not, also that we are looking in search of the truth. If we find that our hypothesis is wrong, we discard it and then we search again. So that is science, right? So in scientific knowledge, in scientific process, we can trust. That is proper scientific process. But however, over the ages, just like how religion has also been hijacked by politics, in the same way, science is now the latest victim of politics. So science have also been hijacked, just like how they say, history is written by the victors. So science is written by the majority, apparently. So the atheistic idea tries to push the idea that in science, we can show that there is no God, but there is no such thing. We have shown how all the greatest scientists who are anytime worth their salt have all agreed that scientific evidence points to an intelligent design, which points to a personality behind all these things. So atheists, they will talk about science, but usually these atheists who talk about science, they will not accept the scientific process completely because they are not in search of truth. They are in search of a philosophy which will suit their agenda. So, and they will use scientific process, they'll hijack scientific process in order to suit their agenda. So in science, we hide, and therefore we have what we call scientism. No longer science. Science is different. This is scientism. Scientism is a belief that only science can solve all the problems of life, and we cannot accept the concept of an incredible God. That is scientism, right? And in this, they already have a set of hypotheses, and from this, they want to come out with their various conclusions. So basically, it has an agenda behind it. There's an agenda. This scientism is driven by an agenda to prove certain something. And they use science, they hijack science to push their agenda. So this is what is going on in the name of science. So we talked about all this previously in quite detail. And what is this agenda? What is this agenda that is now taken over so-called scientific process? Very simple. It is capitalism. Capitalism. What is capitalism? Very simple definition here. Where you can enslave fellow humans and rape the planet and be praised for your good business sense. So it is all about greed. It is all about, and what does greed come from? Greed comes from satisfying one's senses, right? It comes from lust. Lust leads to greed, and greed is never satisfied. It keeps on increasing. And to the extent that it doesn't matter what is being destroyed in order to satisfy that greed. And we also showed you how the ultimate purpose behind this capitalism is basically control. A small group of people, influential, powerful people, want to control majority of the population of this world, and they want to control the resources of this world so that they alone will benefit at the cost of others. So there is a systematic propaganda and an agenda behind all these things. So we have this. So therefore they come up with, therefore they hijack science, they hijack religion, they hijack different political scenarios, and they push this agenda behind all these things. So therefore we have Darwinism, we have various so-called scientific process which denies the existence of God. So, and the reason behind this is given here. An atheist confesses, right? A Scottish anatomist and anthropologist, right? Evolution is unproved and unprovable, yet it is being pushed as the main agenda of science. We believe it only because the only alternative is special creation, which means God. So they don't want to accept this. So this is no longer search for truth. This is agenda. And that is unthinkable. So for the atheist, for the capitalist, they cannot, it's unthinkable, because unthinkable means they cannot digest the concept of God, because if it's God is true, then they are really in trouble because they have done so many horrible things. So, and at the same time, they push it to the furthest corners of their mind, and they build themselves with fake, they create a fake fortress to give them a false sense of security about what they are doing, to justify their actions in the name of science. So in the name of science, many horrible things are done. Animal testing, human testing, all these things are done. So much of pain, all this in the name of so-called science. Unthinkable. So that is the concept. So therefore, Prabhupada says, systematically, there is a propaganda by a section of people to stop glorification of the name and fame of the Supreme Lord. So this has always been there since the early ages. You know, the Knights Templar, then after that, it went on with the Vatican, and there's always been a play here, the stonemasons, the Templars, so like that, and then slowly now it's evolving with so many other types of organized systems, one nation, one world, that kind of concept, you know. So these are the people behind it. Very, very powerful people, very influential people. So the main purpose of Darwinism was to drive away every last trace of an incredible God from biology. Why? As I said before, because they want freedom. They want justification for them to do what they want to do. Freedom of their lust. This is the lust which hides in their heart. So the freedom to do whatever they want without any repercussion. They don't like that religion or God restricts them, that you shouldn't do this, you shouldn't steal, you shouldn't kill. Why should I not kill? Why should I not steal? I will do what I want for my benefit. So therefore, to choose evil is to choose freedom. Freedom from emancipation from all restraint. Right? So this is the reason. So why choose freedom? Freedom to do what? Usually people talk about freedom, 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 but most often than not, the freedom is usually freedom to sin. They want the freedom to sin, go against the law. So elaborate systems such as these have been created, and in the name of science, they are being bandied about. So this all we covered previously in the last session, right? So today we are continuing this concept of scientific spirituality, how spirituality is scientific. It is not a sentimental idea. So Prabhupada likes to say, religion without philosophy is simply sentiment. Sometimes we have religion, people are religious in feeling, but they cannot explain many things. They cannot explain how the world works. They cannot explain karma. They cannot explain why certain things happen to certain people. They cannot explain the goal of life, but they have sentimentality, right? It will be good if that sentimentality is placed in the right direction. But the danger with that is frequently, without strong philosophy to support, people are easily led astray and they are cheated. Prabhupada also says, this world is full of the cheater and the cheated. There are two types of people, the cheater and the cheated. First time we are cheated, it's the cheater's fault. Second time we are cheated, it's our fault. So therefore, we have to understand that there needs to be a very watertight philosophy which needs to explain the entire creation, which needs to explain everything. Scientists like to call it superstring theory. Superstring theory is the theory which explains everything. They are still looking for it, but this is their concept. But we already have this superstring theory. Our Srimad Bhagavatam, our Bhagavad Gita, this is the superstring theory. Our Sanatan Dharma, which explains every aspect of life. So today we are going to talk about the 3 ways of gaining knowledge. One of the things, scientifically, how we can understand. So we talked about logic previously. We talked about the fallacies of so-called scienticism versus scientific method, the agenda behind them. So now, if we want to get knowledge, right, there are 3 ways of getting knowledge. So in the scriptures, it's described in these 3 ways. Pratyaksha praman means proofs or evidence. Pratyaksha praman, Anumana praman, and Shabda praman. So we will talk about them one by one, and their good points and their bad points, and whether or not it's useful to ultimately understand about the Supreme Lord. So firstly, we have what we call Pratyaksha praman. So Pratyaksha praman is, Pratyaksha means directly sense perception. Pratyaksha, that means sense engagement, engaging with the senses. So proofs that we are able to get directly from our senses. So if you want to get knowledge, we rely on our senses, do we not, generally? So what are our senses? So we have our hearing, our smelling, our seeing, our touching, our mouth. So all these things gives us knowledge. But let's just examine to what extent. So with this sense perception, right, this is the basis of scientific experimentation. Scientific experimentation is all about, pemerhatian, right? What we observe, observation. So therefore they say, can I see God? I can't see God, right? So that is a very foolish way of looking at it. right? Just like, can you see gravity? But you can't see gravity. But nevertheless, using another concept, later we will see the second concept, the Anumana Praman, we can understand gravity even though we can't see gravity. We can't see it, we can't taste it, we can't touch it, right? So the same concept applies here. So if someone comes with this logic, I cannot see God, right? Yeah, but at the same time, you cannot say that just because you can't see God, that is not scientific, right? God is there. There are many things which we don't see, but yet we believe, do we not? Right? For example, I give gravity, right? Atoms, have we seen an atom? Right? We have heard of an atom. We have seen so-called pictures of atom. I'll talk about that later. Or at least what the scientists like to tell us about the atoms, right? We have Wi-Fi. What is Wi-Fi actually? Anyone knows? So it's to understand exactly what Wi-Fi is all about. How is it so much of information is being shot into you cannot see that information flying into the air, coming into your phone, but yet we believe it. And then, nowadays we have deep fakes, what we call deep fakes. It's possible now to create videos of people saying things which they have never said or acting things which they have never done. We have nowadays videos like Azmin Ali. Previously they sent a video having he having an affair with a man or something like that, which is, so they say it's a fake. So like that, it's possible to create fake videos of people now with deep fake technology, with artificial intelligence and all that. It's possible to do that already. So seeing is obviously not believing these days, isn't it? So you have to be careful. And other things we see, like look at the concept of I. In mathematics, there's this concept called complex numbers, right? In complex numbers, I is a complex number, which is defined as root to the power of -1. Now, this is an impossible number. You cannot have such a number. -1 cannot have a square root. So, but yet it is defined as a value. And yet we use it in mathematics, in pure mathematics. So there are many things which we don't see, which we cannot taste, which we cannot touch, but yet we believe it. But at the same time, we can also ask ourselves, what can we see? We are so proud about our eyes, right? You say, can I see God? But what can I see? Now we know our eye can only see if there is light, isn't it? If there is no light, we cannot even see anything. No matter how great our eye is, we can't see. And even that light also, this is the full range of light waves from 0.001 nanometer of gamma rays. Can we see gamma rays? We cannot see gamma rays. The wavelength is very, very short. And then there's X-ray, ultraviolet ray, and so forth. And then there are very, very large rays, such as microwave and radio waves, which are larger. We cannot see all these things. So what we can see is only the visible spectrum, which is between 400 nanometers and 700 nanometers in wavelength. Very small strip, just this small strip over here. Within that range only we can see. We cannot see all these other ranges. So that's the power of our sight, ladies and gentlemen. It's nothing to be proud of. In fact, there are many animals which can even beat us flat. So for example, the eagle. The eagle can see from 1,000 feet above, flying 1,000 feet above, it's flying. It can see a fish 3 feet underwater. That is the power of the eyes of the eagle. And there are some creatures who can also see in the infrared zone. We cannot see. Infrared is like, they can see heat signature. What about hearing, right? Now the dog definitely can hear much better than us, isn't it? So the same thing also there. This is the hearing range from 10 decibels, from 10 hertz to 150,000 hertz. These are frequency of sound. The human range is very limited. It's only within here. You can see The dolphin's hearing range is much higher. It can hear frequencies much greater, which we cannot hear. The dog also has a greater, broader range, right? So like that. And the same applies for taste, for touch, for smell. You know, a rat is able to detect poison. Even one small drop, it's not possible to poison a rat, because the rat knows even the smallest micro gram, it can detect poison in taste. So microgram cannot harm it, it will run away. And then the shark can detect a drop of blood in a Olympic sized swimming pool. Just a drop, one drop of blood in the opposite direction. If the shark is in the other direction of a Olympic sized swimming pool, it can detect and it can come after you. Whereas you know, cats, have you seen cats bump against furniture in the dark? They don't, because their whiskers is very sensitive to air current. So therefore, when it comes near a furniture, the air current moves differently. So its whiskers will warn it. So it can actually, just by the sense of touch, it can avoid. So the bottom line here is our senses are limited. They are relative. They are dependent. They are limited. So much only we can see. They are relative. It depends on our what we are seeing. Like, for example, if there's no sunlight, then we cannot see, no matter how great our eyes are. And it is dependent, right? Dependent on the sun and things like that. So in other words, imperfect. So with imperfect senses, we cannot proudly claim, I cannot see God, show me God. So therefore, somebody may argue, okay, our senses are imperfect, but you know, with science, we create instrumentation. So instrumentation, so we have, you know, very complex instruments, satellite instruments and everything. But, you know, in the end, right, ultimately what happens, there are, we have to understand there are gross elements and there are subtle elements. So gross elements such as earth, water, fire, air, ether. Ether is the finest amongst the gross elements, right? So that's why now only we can detect Wi-Fi. Wi-Fi is part of ether. So previously we couldn't detect Wi-Fi. Now we can detect Wi-Fi. So, but it's still gross, but it's a finer element. But we cannot detect mind, intelligence, and ahamkar. This is something beyond us at the moment. So our instruments cannot detect mind, our thoughts. It cannot, it's very difficult. Slowly now, they are developing some experiments to detect thoughts. We have mind neurons, which generate a certain type of electricity pulse, which can, you know, by thinking, you are able to move certain things. So like a wheelchair, which is able to turn right simply by thinking right. Such experiments are coming up now, but that's only at the mind level. They have not even remotely touched intelligence level, and they have not gone into false ego at all. They don't even recognize these things. So these instrumentations are only in the gross level. And at the same time, we have this Nobel laureate physicist. He's a physicist who received Nobel Prize, Eugene Wigner. So he says, even if we photograph the stars, we must eventually take in by our senses what the photograph shows. Furthermore, without our senses, we could not handle a photographic camera. Clearly, all knowledge comes to us ultimately through our senses. So therefore, we are dependent. Even if we create instruments, ultimately, you know, when we do scientific experiments, you know, we have error, scientific error, because we are not reading the data correctly. So therefore, these things have to be taken in by our senses only in the end. So it's safe to say we cannot understand the absolute truth simply through our blunt material senses. We can get ideas, we can get it can help us to understand, but you cannot rely only on that with our blunt material senses. Because why? Because human beings have 4 defects. They have 4 problems. All human beings have 4 problems. So therefore, That's the reason we cannot rely on human beings to give us perfect knowledge. So what are these 4 problems? The first problem is called imperfect senses. So that's what we have already discussed. So our senses are imperfect, but that's not the only problem. Even if somehow we are able to ensure that we get perfect, somehow we get the perfect knowledge of, we are able to make the readings carefully and everything, still we have a second problem to deal with. The second problem human beings deal with is, even though they have imperfect senses, they are subjected to illusion. Human beings can be put into illusion easily, right? So you may ask the question, is seeing believing? Even they may see perfectly. They may see a straw in a cup, right? In a cup of water. And then they see the straw is bent. So is that true? Is the straw bent in the water? So we understand, of course, with knowledge, we know that that's not really the case. It's due to an illusion, optical illusion, right? Due to the refraction of light. So like that, we have many ways to see. Seeing is not believing. We have to still adjust our thinking, right? Here's another example. We see a railway track. We see the railway track becoming smaller and smaller and smaller and eventually trying to meet at the end. Is that really the case? We know it's due to perspective, right? So it's never going to meet. Both the tracks are always going to be separate, same distance only. It's never going to get smaller and never going to meet at one point. So we have to adjust our thinking, adjust our seeing based on our thinking. So therefore it's relative. What our senses are saying, right? It's relative. Here's another one. And it's very dependent. It's dependent on the means of what we are looking. So if we look through something in a convex mirror like this, then we see everything distorted. So therefore, we have the problem of illusion, which can be misleading. So for example, all these lines are straight lines. None of them are actually curved or bent, but put in these red lines, right? But put in this kind of checkered background, it looks like as if the lines are not straight. Another example, these are all straight lines, absolutely 100% straight lines. But under this kind of pattern, it looks like as if the lines are distorted in the center. But it's not the case. Here we have another one. Coils or circles. If you look at it, it looks like as if these are coils, but actually they are not. They are circles. Full circle. You go and follow the line. You see, it's a full circle, right? It's a full circle. These are not coils. So we may be mistaken. Then we have, nowadays wallpaper to give you a 3D effect, right? Here's another one. So what is this? Is the color, if you look at the bar, is the color of the bar changing? Is it changing from light color to a darker color? Actually, it's not. It's the same color only. If you remove the background, I've removed the background, you can see the bar has the same color. No change. So another example. This one, this round circle here and this round circle here, are they the same color? It looks like they are different color, but actually they are the same color. It's just that the background, so you see, our senses are relative. How we see it, from which angle we look at it, it's relative. Just because the background is dark, the color looks dark. But this background is light, this circle looks lighter. Actually, it's the same color. We have physiological illusion. Physiologically, you can see, now, if you look at this picture, it looks like as if all these things are turning slightly, but actually they are not turning. If you look carefully, they are all stationary. This is not an animation. It's just a simple, plain picture. But it looks like as if they are all wobbling about, right? If you look at it, here's an even better one, right? It looks like as if all those wheels are turning here and there. If you stare at it, it looks like as if all the wheels are turning, but actually they are not. They are stationary. This is not an animation. Then here also, you have a rippling effect. It looks like as if this thing is rippling, but actually it's not. It's a static picture. And we have other types of illusion, like paradoxical. At one look, right, it looks like very possible, but this is an impossible picture. Look carefully. It's not possible for this structure to exist. But at one glance, easily it can confuse people. People might take it for real and think this is real, but it's not real. It's impossible to exist. Here's another picture. Impossible to exist, right? You can see one surface suddenly appearing in the back surface, the top surface connecting to the back surface. It's not possible. It cannot exist. This is an impossible structure. Another example: is it ever possible to arrange dice in this manner? It's impossible, isn't it? So again, an illusion. Another illusion here. You can see 2 pillars or 3 pillars. It's not possible. This image is an illusion. It's not possible to have like this 3 pillars, right? So sometimes you have pictures such as these, ambiguous. Somebody will see this picture. They will see an old lady. Another person will see the picture and they will see a young lady. So again, it depends, right? Perspective. Old lady, like this is the big nose, and this is the chin, and this is the mouth, and this is the shawl. So old lady, right? Young lady, this is the neck. She's wearing a neck, and this is the chin and the nose and the eyes and the hair, and this is her scarf. So like that, it can be ambiguous. Different pictures are there. Another picture, just for just for fun. So two elderly couples, or do we see 2 young people playing music? Yeah, we can see both, right? So sometimes nature uses this camouflage. It knows human beings have this problem, right? So therefore, we have camouflage, which is also being used by animals to get their food, right? We have very ingenious camouflage. How butterflies can look like dried leaves, right? Here we have a frog. You can see this is a frog. It looks just like dried leaves. Right? Then we have dynamic illusion. This is fun, right? What do? You stare at this spot. You stare at this spot in the middle, right? It's a static picture. It's not an animation. You stare at this spot in the middle, and then you bring your nose, you bring your face close to the spot, and you bring it further away, like this. What you will see is the wheels turning in opposite direction. As you bring it closer, stare at the spot in the center and bring your head closer, and stare at the spot and bring your head further. You will see the wheels turning. But actually, this is an illusion. It's a static picture only. And this one is even fun. Now, what's happening is you have a crosshair here, and you have blinking lights like this. Now, this blinking lights is very simple. It's just rotating like this, the blinking light. Now, what you do, you stare at the center, the crosshair. You stare at the crosshair, and something amazing will happen. You will see the pink, without blinking, you will see the pink balls have disappeared and only one green ball is going around and round and round. And then you blink back again, you'll see all the pink balls. And then you stare again at the center, you will see the pink ball slowly eaten by the green ball, and only the green ball is remaining. Yes, you can see? Okay, so this is a very powerful image, which I like to show people about how easily we can be fooled. So therefore, our senses are limited, relative, and dependent. Our senses can be easily fooled. There are things we cannot sense, but which we still accept. So these 3 things can answer anyone who says, "Show me God," in arrogance, right? This is how we can defeat them. So then there is the second method of gaining knowledge. Pratyaksha Praman was through senses. Then we have what we call Anumana Praman. We can also gain knowledge from anumana. Anumana means logic, through thinking, through logic based on experience, right? Logical conclusions based on experience. So therefore, we build theories based on what we already think is established fact. So for example, premise 1, premise 2, and based on these two premises, we come to a logical conclusion. For example, we see smoke coming from behind the hill. As soon as we see smoke coming from behind a hill, that's the first premise, right? Second premise is, where there is smoke, there is fire. Something is burning. So our logical conclusion is, there is fire behind the hill. But did we see the fire? No, we didn't see the fire. But what did we see? We only saw smoke. And based on that, based on our experience, we think that there is fire behind the hill. Okay. So, but this problem, this logical conclusion, Anumana Praman, has a weakness. What are the weakness? The weakness is, number one, the conclusions that we make is limited by our experience. So if we have never experienced something, we will never think of the premise correctly. For example, if we have never seen fire, then we would never know what caused the smoke, right? So therefore, because we have seen fire creating smoke, so therefore our experience shows us that. So it's limited by our experience. And on top of that, it is also, exceptions can defeat the entire process. There are exceptions. Is it only fire that creates smoke? So we know that's also chemical which can create smoke. You take chemical, you put on water, no fire involved, just chemical and water mixed together, you get smoke. So that is only for someone who knows chemistry. They know, okay, yeah, there is such a possibility. They use it for shipwreck, right? They throw a certain chemical and then you're able to produce smoke. But people may not know that, so these exceptions may exist. So limited experience may lead to false premise, right? For example, another example I can give you, someone did an experiment with a cockroach. They, what they did is, they took a cockroach and then they cut off one leg of the cockroach. The cockroach has 6 legs, right? So they cut off one leg of the cockroach and then they observed the cockroach in a box. And the cockroach was able to exist. So then they said, okay, cockroach lives. And then they cut off another leg of the cockroach. It's a very cruel experiment, but I'm just telling. So like that, they cut off one by one, 6 legs. And at the end of the 6 legs, then what happened? The cockroach eventually died, right? So the conclusion of the experiment was, the cockroach requires its legs to breathe. Without its legs, it will die. That was the conclusion. Because they gave the cockroach food, everything, but with the legs intact, it was able to survive. But when the legs were cut off one by one, the cockroach was not able to look for food. And then it died of starvation eventually. So, but the conclusion they made is totally wrong. They think that the only way the cockroach could die was due to suffocation, because the food was provided, but the cockroach couldn't get to the food. So they ignored that concept. So therefore, this is a famous example philosophers like to give to show how wrong conclusions can be made. Another example, you have a closed door. Behind the closed door, you come to the closed door, you put your ear to it and you hear terrible fight. A husband and a wife are fighting and you hear crashing sound and a wife screaming. And then what would you do? You would think that there's domestic violence going on. So, but actually, you open the door, they see inside, they see there is a home theater system and they are watching TV. The family is watching TV. So Therefore, you can see how logical conclusions can be mistaken, subject to incorrect reasoning. And exceptions defeat the process. So this is the problem with Anumana, right? So we have the 4 defects of human beings. We have imperfect senses, we have subject to illusion, and even though we apply Anumana Praman, which is experience and logic, still there's a problem because we can make mistakes. So Anumana Praman is where scientific logic and hypothesis and theory come about. So we must understand scientific knowledge is also based on our experience, and exceptions do exist, which can lead it wrong. And at the same time, human beings have a tendency to commit mistakes. And I can show you some of these mistakes. So 17th century, Newton, he develops the laws of mechanics. An apple drops on his head, and then he comes up with the 3 laws of what do you call it? The first law of Newton, the second law of Newton, the third law of Newton, right? So, and like that, laws of mechanics to describe the behavior of physical matter. Right, then what happened? Then soon it was declared universal truth. Whatever Newton has said is considered universal truth. It applies all over the universe. But later on, in the 18th century, research into the microscopic and macroscopic world, it soon showed that Newton's laws are not applicable in those regions. That means when you start looking at atoms, at molecules, microscopic, then it doesn't really follow Newton's law already. And when they look at very large systems, like planetary systems, even larger than planets, right? They find that in macroscopic world, again, laws of mechanics by Newton doesn't apply. So, oops, mistake, all right? So therefore, it's only up to the 20th century that for 3 centuries that they accepted that this was universal truth. Only at 20th century, Max Planck, he created quantum physics to explain the subatomic particle behavior. So very, very small molecules and atoms, he came up with his theory to describe this behavior, which is different from Newton's theory. And to explain cosmology, macroscopic scale, then we have on the 20th century also, Einstein came up with this. So for 3 centuries, people accepted Newton's law as universal. So the scientists will not admit this too much, but that was the case. They thought anybody who says otherwise were ridiculed and they were not accepted. So it took these 2 geniuses to clearly put these things. So that is the theory of general relativity. So therefore, we have Steven Weinberg, a Nobel laureate astrophysicist. So what he says, as we make progress understanding the expanding universe, the problem itself expands. The more we do research, the more we discover, the more we see the problem also expands itself. What we thought was a small problem suddenly becomes a deeper problem. So the more we discover, we find even a deeper problem. The more we discover further, we see even a deeper problem. So therefore the solution always seems to recede from us. This is what he says. Example, in 1979, Mycoplasma genitalium, this is a single cell living entity. They thought it was a very simple cell, right? It was in fact given in biology textbooks, a simple cell only. But it was only in 1996 that the same Mycoplasma genitalium, they discovered inside with the development of electron microscope, how actually it's so detailed. So many other smaller subcell elements which are within. We have the mitochondria and so many other things. So same thing with atom. The first model of the atom was developed by Dalton. We sometimes learn this in our science book. Atom, the Dalton model, simple ball. Atoms, and his theory was atoms are indivisible. You cannot divide them. This was the truth. And then almost 100 years later, Thomson model came about to show actually they are divisible. So there are electrons and protons floating about within the atom like a plum pudding. So this is called the plum pudding model, 1904. 100 years later, 100 years. And then very rapidly, there were changes. Less than 10 years, Rutherford's model said, no, they are not floating like plum puddings. They are moving about like a, there is a neutron and proton are centered here, whereas electron is turning around in an orbit. So a planetary model. And then 1913, Bohr's model brought it even further to show that not just one orbit, there are several orbits around the atom, around the nucleus of the atom. That's 1913. And this is what most of us would have studied in science. And then in 1926, the wave model came about, where we had orbitals, the S and the P and the spin. This we learn in Form 6, in A-level chemistry, the orbitals, right? And then in 1964, the quark model came about. Now, this one we never learned in our science, in A-levels. So quark model, the latest atomic model looks like this. And now Kenneth Wilson, the same astrophysicist laureate, he says, right now, the equations that describe proton structure are extremely complicated. So you can see how science continuously evolves. One day they say this is the case. Tomorrow they will say, oh, I'm so sorry. Whatever we said is wrong. We made a huge mistake, but no, keep quiet. Don't tell anybody about our mistake, right? We will hide it all, right? For the progress of science. So in this way, many things are being passed on today as truth, but actually it's not really the truth. It's still a lot of things that keeps changing. So in other words, scientific inquiry using anumana based on our limited experience, it's like this experience. Like I'm going to show you a simple example of how the color of birds. This is imagine this is an imaginary study to show you a fact, to show you the principle of how science works. Example, the color of birds, an exhaustive scientific study by Dr. John Birdwatcher, PhD in ornithology. Okay, so what does he do? Right, he wants to determine the color of birds. So Friday, I have begun the study to determine the color of all birds on Earth. And observation are made with latest technology, Sony camera, whatever, 8 times zoom or whatever. To avoid errors, I have with me a trusted assistant. What's the aim? To determine the color of all birds on planet Earth. Methodology, simple systematic observation of every bird that passes within visual range of the observer. Apparatus, camera, strong pair of eyes, and an extra pair of eyes. Okay, it looks very sound and scientifically very well done. So therefore, they may look, first observation, they see a black bird. Okay. Second observation, black bird. Third observation, black bird. Eighth observation, black bird, black bird, black bird, black bird. Okay. Then they say, today I have neared the end of the study. Determine the color of all birds. Observations were made. All evidences has been recorded. Progress report on next page. We see that all these observations show that black birds. Conclusion, after exhaustive study of the bird species, we can conclude on the basis of extensive evidence that all birds on planet Earth are black. And then blackbird theory confirmed by scientists all over the world. And then Nobel Prize for blackbird theory. And then suddenly someone finds white bird. Oops, bad data. This must be a bad data. Either we got the data wrongly or some erroneous observation. Something must have gone wrong. Because, established Nobel Prize, blackbird theory, all birds are black. And then more and more people start observing white birds. More bad data. No, this is all bad data. So what the scientists do? They ignore the evidence which will come. They will reject it. They will not accept it. They will ridicule it. And because, it it goes against the grain of the established theory. So more bad data. And then, but if enough people discover this white bird, then they will change it. Oh, we are now on the verge of a major breakthrough in ornithology. So to reconcile both the theories, they will say now, the grand unified theory, all birds are either black or white. So then new theory is confirmed. People are watching, okay, white birds are there. And then new theory is confirmed again. Oh, blackbird, yeah, that is also true. And then again, white bird, new theory confirmed beyond all doubts. So therefore now we launch a new Nobel Prize for unified bird theory. And then again it continues. Suddenly someone spots a pink bird. Oops, bad data. And the whole eon continues again. So this is basically the problem with anumana or logical perception. We are continuously searching, and this is what happens. Every bad data which initially crops up is suppressed and hidden if it doesn't fit the agenda until sufficient data is emerging in the public domain. Then they have no choice. Then if it fits the data, if it fits the agenda, they will modify the agenda, and then they will try to accept it. So therefore, we have the 4 defects. Imperfect senses, subject to illusion, and tendency to commit mistakes, right? To err is human. But we also, unfortunately, go one step further. It's not enough that we have imperfect senses, we are subject to illusion, we have commit mistakes. All human beings can, has happened. All this has happened to all human beings. No human being can say that I'm free of this. But we go one step further. There's one more thing that human beings do. We have a tendency to cheat. So this is also another problem. No one can say, I have never cheated in my life. In some way, we must have cheated. So this is a problem with humans. So therefore, we have scientific fraud. 2004, 2005, stem cell research fraud, right? They claim succeeded in creating human embryonic stem cells by cloning. The implications of such a discovery published in different journals, breakthrough in medical restoration, treatment, degenerative diseases, right? And then they discovered that he's a fraud. The theory was falsified. So hundreds of journals have to be revoked. PhDs had to be revoked, all built on false premise. So you can imagine, and you'd be very, very surprised to know that there are a lot of this happening in the scientific world, and a lot of this is not really shown. I can tell you because I'm in the field. We are doing research on that, so we see these things. It's there, and it happens. Nanotechnology research fraud, 2001. Dr. Jan Hendrik Schon, PhD from the University of Constance, got a prize also, Weber Bank Prize, Braunschweig Prize, Outstanding Young Investigator Award, listed as an author on an average of 1 research paper every 8 years. He claimed to discover organic-based transistor. 21 journals published. Can you imagine? So what happens? So all this has to be revoked. So these are frauds. And now we have so many this fraud is there in every field, and definitely is there in archaeological field. Archaeological field, 19th century creator of many. What they do, they actually create bones, and they plant bones. They are so desperate to prove their agenda, they actually plant bones, and then they pretend to dig it up, and then they try to create links. So this is being done with so-called dinosaur bones. Most dinosaur bones, they are not even 15% complete. They are less than 15%. They find bits and pieces of bone, and then they imagine that these are some kind of connection to dinosaurs. The rest of the 75% of the structure majority of this structure is invented. So, these are all caught people. who planted specimens of false layers to gain more prestige, Mexican forger of pre-Columbian antiquities, purveyor of fake biblical artifacts, Dutch amateur archaeologists whose Middle Paleolithic finds were declared forgeries. So these are all forgers you can read about. Piltdown man, this was a huge thing. This is one of the biggest things which destroyed the Darwin's theory. Piltdown man, somebody actually forged this Piltdown man and they were caught. Yeah, so like that, there are so many. So here's a Piltdown man. Impact of hoax. A dozen doctoral dissertations were awarded based on this discovery, which was a fake. It was basically pieces of a lower bone. The lower jaw bone was missing. And to prove the fact of Darwin, they actually took this lower jaw bone from a pig and it was planted. 500 articles were written about Piltdown man, so-called scientific acceptance. 300 books and scholarly journal papers were made based on this Piltdown man. It took 40 years to expose. Can you imagine? Scientists were not willing to accept the expose when it came out. It took 40 years before they finally admitted, yes, we are wrong. Sorry, huh? But you know, but no, but Darwin is correct. So like that. So in the end, so what am I trying to say? In the end, we have this imperfect sense, subject to illusion, commit mistakes, tendency to cheat. So due to this tendency to cheat, we have this idea of suppressing bad data. We try to fit our theories to meet our agenda. And ultimately, it is all being controlled, right? In the name of science, there are people who are pulling the strings behind. So ultimately, the capitalism is pulling the strings behind what kind of research is to be pushed to the mainstream and what kind of research is not to be pushed to the mainstream or not to be accepted. So what has been the outcome? So scientists, they like to promise all kinds of things. Politicians, scientists, they promise all, they give you promise of great advancement, great development. But what has been the outcome so far? We have bigger, fancier houses, but smaller, broken families. We have, all this has given us more conveniences, surely without a doubt, but definitely much less time. More degrees, more PhDs, but a lot less sense. So many horrible things happening in the world. More so-called experts all over the world, all over the governments. But still, so much more problems, right? Despite all these so-called experts and all this so-called science, right? We still have about 10 billion kilograms of plastic in the ocean. Can you imagine? And 2.1, how many is this? Million, billion, 2.1 billion kilos of trash each year, which only just 16% of this is recycled. So what's happening with all our experts? We get more medicines, but so much less wellness. And we have taller buildings, but shorter tempers, wider freeways, but narrower viewpoints, spend too recklessly, but laugh way too little, spend more, but enjoy less. Usually who enjoys? Usually the maids enjoy. Definitely in my Taman, you know, they have houses and cars and everything, but it's usually the maids who enjoy everything, the facilities, the boss and all, but no time to do anything. Learn how to make a living, but not a life. And we have wonderful, great achievements in cities such as this. Anyone recognizes the city? This is the city of what do you call, Seoul in South Korea. So you can see, wow, right? One of the most developed, modern and richest countries in the world, South Korea, in this city. boasting so many wonderful world's top facilities, including the fastest internet connection, super modern technologies, one of the world's best education, healthcare, high-tech G11 economy, well-educated populace. Everyone is well-educated, highly educated, globally admired popular culture, society plagued by very few of the social ills. They are virtually free of drug abuse, homelessness, street crime. All this is very, very low in South Korea. So people will say, yes, we have achieved all these things, but what is the result? What's the result in South Korea? You'll be shocked to know that South Korea ranks number 4 in the highest suicide rate in the world. 26.9 suicides per 100,000 people. So, and this is not only in South Korea. A disturbing trend is seen all over the world in rich countries. You can see here, Lithuania tops the world. Lithuania is a country in Europe, very beautiful country. Number 1 in the world for suicide. Number 2 is Russia. Number 4 is South Korea. Number 11 is Belgium. 12 is Hungary. 14 Japan, France, Switzerland, Finland, Austria, Sweden, Portugal, Iceland, Germany, Luxembourg, Australia, Denmark, Netherlands, Canada, Norway. Aren't these all rich countries? And they are one of the top 50, 1 to 44. They are top 50. USA is number 34. And these are all the top wealthiest countries in the world with the highest rate of suicide. Whereas if you see the poorest countries in the world, the lowest country, Antigua, Barbados, Grenada, Bahamas, you can see their GDP is very, very low, right? But you can see their suicide rate is also very, very low. So you can see, so this is known as the Easterlin paradox. The paradox where rich countries, they show the lowest happiness index, whereas the poor countries have a much greater happiness index. So, therefore, Prabhupada says, when God made Varnashram Dharma, which is strictly meant for developing animal consciousness into human consciousness, and human consciousness into godly consciousness, is broken by advancement of foolishness. The whole system of peaceful and progressive life is at once disturbed. So this is what's happening in the name of so-called progress and development, right? We have abandoned Varnashram Dharma. What was the purpose? It was to keep us strictly focused on spiritual development. But we broke this. We not only broke it, we raped it, and it became completely perverted, and then became completely abandoned. And now it's all about one single society, classless society. But it has become a godless society, broken by advancement of foolishness. This is what Prabhupada says, advancement of foolishness, because it's not working towards the goal of life. And therefore, peaceful and progressive life is at once disturbed. So therefore, I repeat this thing again. As we make progress understanding the expanding universe, the problem itself expands, so that the solution always seems to recede from us. So from the scientific point of view, we will never reach any solution in life. We simply push the solution to a different level, right? We solve something, but we open up another host of problems. Just like this picture here. We solved the problem of transportation, but what came about with it? With the problem of transportation, with steam engine or petrol engine, we have congestion, we have traffic, we have environmental pollution, we have earthquakes due to oil mining, so many other things. So that's the problem. So therefore, what's the last one? The last one is Shabda Praman. Shabda Praman is knowledge, 3 ways of getting knowledge: Pratyaksha, Anumana, right? One is sense perception, the other is logic and experience. But the third one, Shabda Praman, is the best method for spiritual understanding. This is really the best method actually for all kinds of understanding. What is this? Basically, it means authoritative understanding. That means you get the information from the authority, and that's it. Perfect knowledge. You don't need to use your senses to do experiment. You don't have to use your limited intelligence and your logic and our limited experience and to come up with a conclusion. Instead, we accept perfect knowledge given by the perfect person to us. That is Shabda Praman. So an example is like this. Story of 6 blind men. So we have 6 blind men, right? And each of these 6 blind men, they went and touched something. And when they touched something, they thought that one person touched something very sharp. And he thought that whatever he touched must be, oh, since it's very sharp and long, it must be an arrow. Another blind man touched randomly, and he saw that this object, oh, it's long and curvy. So I think I must have touched a snake. And it's right. Then another blind man, he touched the same object, but he saw the object as flat and very flat and sharp. So he thought that this must be a axe. Another blind man touched the same object, and he thought that this is a brick wall which I'm touching. It's very solid and must be a brick wall I'm touching. Another man touched a piece of something which looked like a rope, so he thought it's a rope. Another blind man touched something and he thought that it was a tree trunk, because he could cover, it was like a very stiff structure, like a tree trunk. But actually, all of them touched one object only, and they touched the elephant. But because they were blind, and because they approached it from their own limited experience, one blind man, before he became blind, he has seen a snake. Another blind man, he has seen arrows. Another blind man, he was a dealer of ropes. So like that, each of them were covered with their own perception, and they all tried to approach the object from their own point of view. But actually, because they were all approaching it in their own view, they could not see the full picture. Why? Because they were blind, obviously. So is everyone wrong? Right? So obviously they are wrong in their idea, but it's not a snake, it's not a rope, it's not a tree trunk, it's not an arrow, but there is a semblance of truth to it. So therefore, what doesn't it doesn't exist? It's an illusion? No, it does exist. It's not an illusion. It's just that they were blind. So is everyone right? In a way. But the big picture is, you cannot say an elephant is a rope. Does it look, is there certain parts of the body which looks like a rope? Yes, but that doesn't mean the elephant is a rope. So like that, people like to say, oh, God is love, God is mercy, God is this, God is that. They are all right, but God is much, much, much more beyond that. And there is one that the every part of it is part of God, and we cannot understand it fully unless, if only we had the eyes to see, right? So if only we had the eyes to see, you could say, then they could understand that it's an elephant. So where do we get these eyes to see? Therefore, Krishna says, Veda Chakshu. We have to get the eyes to see from scripture, the Vedic conclusion. Why? Why is it we have to see these truths from the Vedic conclusion? Now, very quickly, I'll just take a few more. Now it's 9 o'clock. If you can give me another 15 minutes, 10 to 15 minutes, I think we can finish it. So now imagine this is the universe. And in this universe, we have this material world, material creation, right? Material world, we are all in here. Now, within this material world, in one small planet, there is one inquisitive person. This inquisitive person, he has a question. He wants to understand whether there's God or not. So, is he going to use pratyaksha? If he uses pratyaksha, he wants, okay. He wants to understand whether there is God. He wants to know about the spiritual world, right? So he wants to know how can he know? This person has never been to the spiritual world. His experience doesn't cover the spiritual world. He knows nothing about the spiritual world. He knows nothing about God, right? So he's within this well. You can say it's like a well. It's like a frog which has gone into a well. The frog is born in a well. It's born in a well and lived all its life in a well. Can the frog ever know about the ocean? It will only know about the water in its own well, right? How can it ever, if somebody tries to describe the ocean to the frog will never understand how an ocean looks like. So by pratyaksha, by experiment and using our senses, we can never understand the spiritual world. We can never understand God. We can, get an idea that there is God, but we can never know for a fact. Not possible. What about anumana? Can we use logic? Yes, we can. Just like how in the beginning, in the previous session, we talked about how logic can be used to understand, yes, certainly there is a creator, right? But we cannot know more details about it. We can know, Lord Krishna gives us sufficient logic to know that yes, there is God. So that is enough for us to start searching. But logic alone cannot bring us to the ultimate personality of Godhead. The details cannot be provided. So we need more than logic. So then what? So this absolute knowledge, the only way this inquisitive person in this well of this material world can understand about spiritual world and God is if this absolute knowledge is with God. And God, by his mercy, has to bring down this absolute knowledge to this inquisitive person. Right? Only then that person can understand. So therefore, this is called Shabda. The Lord instructs personally. He himself directly gives the scriptures. And in this way, absolute knowledge coming perfectly from God is brought down to the material world for the benefit of the inquisitive person. So then they can know in perfect knowledge. So therefore, Brahma says, Tene Brahma Hridaya Adi Kavaye, Srimad Bhagavatam. Right? This is the invocation verse. He says, the Vedic knowledge was revealed by the Supreme Person within the heart of the first created being, Brahma. So therefore, this person was Brahma, the first person within this material creation. And this knowledge was revealed into the heart of Brahma by the mercy of Krishna. Where's the evidence? This is the evidence. Tene Brahma Hridaya Adi Kavaye. Hridaya, in the heart, Brahma, the heart of Brahma, this knowledge was, the Vedic knowledge was revealed by who? By that Supreme Person. So it's not man-made. And coming down through disciplic succession, carefully preserved and indicated in the scriptures through your disciplic succession for our benefit. So in this way, we can understand God and spiritual matters and about the spiritual world. And this Vedic wisdom is so many branches of this Vedic wisdom. Lord Krishna came in his incarnation of Dvaipayana Vyasa, and he created all these things for the benefit of human beings. He made the Shruti, he made the Smriti, he gave so many information on how to live, using economics, how to live life as a human being, given duties for all of us so that we can slowly progress, gave us Varnashram Dharma rules, gave us knowledge of food, how to cook, how to build, how to heal, how to take care of our health, how to even fight, how to enjoy life. All of this information was given in the Vedic scriptures through the various different parts. And on top of that, he also gave knowledge on how to get out of this material creation, the purpose behind creation. Why are you here? Why are we suffering? What is going on? What is our goal of life? How do we go back to God? All this is also given here. Hmm? And to give us faith that this is indeed perfect knowledge, right? The Vedas have never failed us. You know, this picture I'm putting here, this picture is one of the stamba. There are two stambas, one in Delhi and one in South India, now only existing. These two stambas, they are made out of metal, a specific blend of metal, which has been there for hundreds to almost thousands of years, but it never rusted. And until today, scientists cannot understand the real composition of this metal. They do not know how they got this kind of composition. They cannot reproduce the same type of metal. With all the latest scientific technology, they cannot do it. So this tamba is there still in India. And where they get this knowledge of metallurgy? From the Vedas. So the Vedas have been infallible. Whatever the Vedas have said has only been true. It hasn't been proven wrong. For example, amazing predictions. The Vedas predicted the advent of of Buddha, the advent of Sankaracharya mentioned in the scripture, Ramanujacharya mentioned in the scripture, Madhvacharya mentioned in the scripture, what he will do, when he will come, who his parents are, which village is born, how long he will live. All this is mentioned. Chanakya Pandit, the most recent Brahmana during Chandragupta Maurya's empire, his name is also mentioned. Lord Jesus also mentioned, he's called Isha in the Bhavisha Purana. You know, we all know, right? Nabi Isa is who? Jesus. Bhavisha Purana mentions him, why he comes, when he comes, right? We have the Saraswati River, geographic places like in the Padma Purana, so many holy rivers, holy cities, which are still existing today. Kurukshetra, thousands and millions of years old, until today is still there. So all these places which are mentioned in scriptures, they have stood the test of time. And Vedas are the oldest scriptures, right? 5,000, almost 4 to 5,000 years old. And yet, before we got wonderful satellites or telescopes, we already knew about the existence of planets. We know about Jupiter, we know about Saturn, we know about Sun, we know about the stars. We not only we know about them, we know how to calculate exactly when the rotation, their orbit, the eclipse, all the astrological phenomena. Until today, they are accurate even with the NES, even if you compare with NASA, they are accurate as of today. How was this possible? All this is from scripture. The cow, you know, if we use logic, the Vedas say that, you know, we all know cow is pure. So cow is pure, and we know that the excrement, the waste of the animal is not pure. So the stool, the waste of the excrement of the animal is not pure. In fact, it smells horrible, isn't it, usually? But the cow is exception. So how will we ever know this exception? Unless we test each and every excrement of every living creature in the world, we will not know. So this exception, this knowledge is given by the scripture. The cow's dung, the cow dung is so pure that it can be used to bathe deities. You can make medicine out of it. Dried cow dung you can apply on your wound with honey, and it can heal your wound. And in this way, so many wonderful things you can do with cow dung. Who will believe? The modern scientists used to laugh, but now they accept, because scientific, but they, you know, grudgingly they accept. They don't want to accept fully, because then it will mean that they have to accept the Vedas, but they don't want to. So, but nevertheless, they grudgingly keep quiet about it, because Indian scientists have shown many experiments about the cow dung. But, you know, using logic, we may argue, you know, if the cow dung, the cow is so pure, and the dung of the cow is so pure. Now, the Vedas glorify the Brahmana equally like the cow. So if the cow is pure, the Brahmana is also pure. That means the dung of the Brahmana, the stool of the Brahmana is also must be pure. So somebody might be thinking that way, but that is nonsense. That is called nonsensical thinking. The Brahmana's excrement is never pure. No human being, no matter how great, is never pure. The excrement. Stool is stool. Only exception is cow. So this kind of knowledge we can only get from the Vedas. So like that, there are many knowledge like this, which only the Vedas can tell us. The specific property of each and every material, each and every animal, each and every mantra, sound, vibration, everything. It's all there in our scriptures. So therefore, in the face of all and we also predicted Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's prediction is also given in the scriptures. So therefore, if we want to get perfect knowledge, we must hear from the perfect source through the perfect system of parampara, which is mentioned in the perfect scriptures itself, right? So that we don't get cheated and that we don't get astray. So, and this is scientific. So finally, the question is, there's one question which we have. Is it possible to have permanent solution to our problems? Can we have permanent solution to our problems? Can we have everlasting happiness? Who can answer this? Can the degree holder answer this? Can the doctors answer this? Can the chemists and the scientists answer this? Can the PhD and the professors and the politicians answer this? Right? Can the people who control the world answer this? Right? They don't know. But they would like to give you false ideas. They will say, with science, you take this medicine, everything will be cured. But they don't tell you the side effect you're going to get from that. And then they will tell you, you take this method, then you use this equipment, everything will be fine. But they don't tell you what effect it's going to cause. So in science, in materialism, every single so-called solution which has come has always had a side effect. It is simply a matter of time before we discover it. So therefore, can these people answer? Can there be perfect happiness? Can all our problems be solved? They cannot answer. But the greatest of our minds, the greatest of our scientists, they think so. I strongly think so. They think so. Who are the greatest scientists? Albert Einstein, Isaac Newton, Galileo Galilei, Max Planck, the founder of quantum mechanics, Michael Faraday, William Thomson Kelvin, Nicholas Copernicus, Louis Pasteur, Johannes Kepler, Plato, Socrates, Aristotle, Aquinas, Descartes, Kant. I'm sure all these names are very popular, very famous. You must have heard all their names. These are the greatest minds and the greatest scientists, which we don't see today. And they all believed in God. They all believed in the power of the Supreme Lord. They all believe that science is subservient to the spiritual truth. So yes, they strongly think so, right? Which is now denied by so-called science. But for a fact, Prabhupada says, I know so. This is what a devotee can give you. A devotee can tell you with certainty and with fact. Why? Because jnaninas tattva darshanaha. Because they have seen the truth. They know the truth. They have realized God. They have seen Krishna. So yes, I know so. Yes, this world is not a fit place for gentlemen. And Prabhupada says, but you can go back to home, back to Godhead, and attain eternal body, blissful life. So this is the promise given by Shankaracharya, promise given by Ramanujacharya, Madhvacharya, Ramanujacharya, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, all the disciplic succession acharyas, and including Srila Prabhupada, because they all adhere to the scriptures. This is the promise of the scriptures given by Krishna. So therefore, Vedascha sarvair Aham eva vidyo. Bhagavad Gita 15:15. By all the Vedas, I am to be known. How will we go back to Godhead? How will we go back to a blissful life? How will we attain eternity? How will we solve all our problems? The way to do that is to know God. And to know God, we need to refer to the scripture and the Guru. So Vedaischa Sarvam, by all the Vedas, I am to be known. Krishna's promise here in the Bhagavad Gita. So that's basically it. So Prabhupada says, we are trying to give people that happiness which will never be exhausted. So take it, Prabhupada says. This is our objective of happiness. Take it. So therefore, take this food for the soul, which is given by the Supreme Lord. And in this way, we can perfect our life. So with that, we'd like to end. Jai Sri Krishna Chaitanya, Prabhu Nityananda, Shri Advaita Gadadhara, Shri Vasadi Gaura Bhakta. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Jai Srila Prabhupada ki, Jai Bhagavad Gita ki, Jai Chaitanya Mahaprabhu ki, Jai Bhagavad Gita ki. So thank you very much, everyone, for patiently waiting and hearing. And so if there are any questions, we can address them. So we have completed our scientific spirituality topic.
Thank you, Prabhu. It was awesome. I learned a lot of new things.
Okay, thanks for that. So I'm happy that you are able to appreciate it. So I hope it develops faith in us to accept the glories of our scriptures. They are not ordinary. They are coming from the Supreme Lord. The more we hear about them, the more we read them, the more we will be amazed, and the more information we will get. So the sum of that is, it begins with Bhagavad Gita, and after that we will go deeper into Bhagavatam. Bhagavad Gita is the instruction of God for humankind, the summary. And if we want to know God, after we hear the instructions of God, we would naturally be wanting to know more about God, because knowing God is remembering God and going back to God. And that is where Bhagavatam comes in, Srimad Bhagavatam, the cream of all the Vedic scriptures. So that's the plan. So after we have finished our Gita Gyan level 2, we will go through some more. We have done chapter 14, I think, 14 or 15. We'll have 16, 17, 18, I think 3 or 4 more weeks to go. And after that, we will then happily move into Srimad Bhagavatam. It's the beginning of a long journey. We will try to finish Canto 1 in, maybe it will take a year or so. So if you are patient, we can hear. It's part of the, anyway, that is the plan. All right, so thank you very much, everyone, for joining. Any other questions anyone would like to say before we close? No? Okay. So thanks for that then. So hope you all have a good evening, what's remainder of it, and we will see you all again next time. See you. Hare Krishna. Bye-bye.